Can you really achieve financial freedom on a minimum wage? Most would say no, that it's impossible, that the income is barely enough to survive. And maybe you've experienced it yourself, working long hours, coming home tired, and watching your money evaporate in debt, bills, and basic expenses. But what almost no one knows is that the minimum wage doesn't have to be a punishment. It can become a tool, the first step on a ladder that takes you much further than you imagine. It's not a myth. Thousands of people around the world with very low incomes have managed to invest, save, and transform their finances until they achieved independence. The difference was never in the amount, but in the mindset. Because what you do with every dollar that comes into your pocket will determine whether it will be a chain or a key that unlocks your future. Today, we're going to discover together how to use the minimum wage to achieve financial freedom. And we'll do it step by step with real examples, practical strategies, and lessons learned by some of the greatest investors in history. Salary doesn't define your destiny. When someone hears the phrase minimum wage, they immediately associate it with limitations, with scarcity, with the impossibility of growing. And it's understandable. It seems like an income designed solely for survival, not for progress. But the truth is that your salary isn't your destiny. It's simply your starting point. In fact, according to studies by WealthX and Credit Suisse, 70% of today's millionaires are first generation. This means they were born into ordinary households without inheritances or privileges, and many of them started out working in low-paying jobs. What set them apart from the rest? It wasn't luck nor a magical stroke of fortune, but the mindset with which they used each coin. Imagine your income as a river. For some, that river flows straight into the sea of consumption. Fast food, trendy clothes, small expenses that seem insignificant but add up. For others, that same river feeds a system of canals and reservoirs. A small nest egg, a modest investment, and an emergency reserve. The difference isn't in the flow of the river, but in how you decide to channel it. If you earn the minimum wage today and spend everything on surviving the day, your money evaporates like water in the desert. But if you manage to set aside even 5%, even if it feels ridiculous at first, you're sending a clear message. I am not a slave to money. I am its architect. That small gesture changes the equation, because it's not about how much, but about the discipline to always do it. The minimum wage may feel like a prison with invisible walls, but it can actually become your financial gym. There, where every penny counts, is where you train your ability to manage the little. And when you learn to masterfully manage the little, you become capable of multiplying the big when it arrives. I invite you to write it down in the comments like a personal declaration. Nothing stops me. Everything drives me. Because even if your income is low today, your mindset can be bigger than any number on a payroll. The rule of setting aside before spending. One of the biggest financial mistakes is this. Most people spend first, and if there's anything left over, they save it. The problem is that there's almost never anything left over. Life is full of invisible expenses that devour any attempt at saving. That's why millions of people work hard for decades, and at the end of their working lives, they have nothing but memories and debt. Warren Buffett understood from a very young age that he should do the opposite, pay himself first. Even if it was a symbolic amount, that portion was untouchable. What was left afterward was what was available to survive. This simple mental shift is what separates the one who always runs after money from the one who makes money work for him. Let's do a realistic calculation. Let's say you earn $400 a month. If you set aside just $20 or 5% and invested in a fund that returns an average of 10% annually, in 20 years you'll have more than $15,000. It may sound modest, but compare it to someone who never set aside anything. That person will still have zero. You, on the other hand, will have capital that can serve as the basis for a larger investment, for a startup, or simply to ensure your peace of mind. Those $20 aren't just savings. Imagine each bill as a soldier. If you keep it in a piggy bank, it sits dormant, doing nothing. But if you invest it, you turn it into an active soldier, fighting for you, conquering more financial ground while you rest. In 10 years, you'll have a small army. In 20, a respectable one. And in 30, a fortress that's hard to tear down. The secret is to understand that the money you pay yourself should not be negotiable. Just as you wouldn't skip your electricity or water bills, you can't skip that payment toward your future. The habit of setting aside before you spend is the bridge that connects a modest salary to an abundant life. The power of invisible discipline. When we think of wealth, we often imagine grand, visible gestures, multi-million-dollar businesses, stock market investments, mansions, or luxury cars. But the reality is that building financial freedom begins in the invisible, not in newspaper headlines, but in the silent decisions you make every day. People who manage to transform a minimum wage into financial independence don't do so with a single spectacular move, but with a set of small, consistent choices. They decide not to buy coffee every day on the street and instead make it at home. They cancel that streaming subscription they rarely use. They choose to cook their meals instead of spending each week at restaurants. It may seem trivial, but let's do the math. A $2 coffee a day equals $60 a month, $720 a year. A $10 meal out, repeated 3 times a week, adds up to more than $1,500 a year. And a $15 subscription you don't use represents $180 a year. With these 3 decisions alone, we're talking about almost $2,400 freed up annually. Now, if those $2,400 aren't spent, but instead invested in a fund with an 8% annual return, in 10 years, they'll grow into more than $34,000. That's the magic of compound interest. What seemed like a small sacrifice turns into a snowball that grows on its own over time. The most powerful thing is that this invisible discipline isn't about living a life of deprivation, but about consciously choosing where you want your money to work. In the end, it's not a coffee that makes you free or a slave, but the sum of the decisions that build your financial future. True wealth doesn't begin in a bank. It begins in your daily routine, in those choices that no one applauds, but that will one day lead you to live debt-free and with peace of mind. The status trap. One of the reasons the minimum wage never seems to be enough is because many people fall into the appearance trap. Instead of using money as a seed for the future, they turn it into disguises for the present. Designer clothes bought on installments, new cell phones every year, giant televisions paid for in 12 months with hidden interest. The problem isn't low wages, but the desire to show off something that hasn't yet been built. This need to appear is the fastest path to poverty, because money ceases to be a resource and turns into smoke. And while we seek to impress others, freedom slips away. An inspiring example is Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on the planet, who still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for just $31,500. This isn't because he can't move into a palace, but because he understood a profound truth. Freedom is worth far more than appearances. The right question isn't, can I afford it? Because the answer will almost always be yes, even if it means going into debt. The real question is this bringing me closer or further away from financial freedom? Every purchase can be a chain or a lever, depending on the intention with which you make it. And it's not about giving up everything, but rather prioritizing. A $300 cell phone can serve almost the same purpose as a $1,200 one. A used car in good condition can take you to the same destination as a luxury car. The difference lies in whether you want your money to bring you immediate status or long-term freedom. And if you truly want to commit to this vision, write it in the comments. I accept success and happiness in my life. Because when you consciously choose freedom over appearances, you are sowing the seeds for a solid and abundant future. Investing before you're ready. One of the biggest financial mistakes is waiting until you have enough money to invest. That moment, for most people, never comes. Life always presents new emergencies, an unexpected bill, a repair, a medical expense, a whim. And so time, the most valuable resource for multiplying money, slips away quietly. Warren Buffett is the living example of the opposite. He bought his first stock at age 11. He didn't have a large sum, but he did have something more important: vision. That small, early decision allowed him to kickstart the compound interest machine, which multiplied his wealth over decades until it became one of the largest fortunes on the planet. Now let's think about the numbers. If today you can only invest $50 a month in an index fund that yields, on average, 8% annually, in 30 years you'll have more than $75,000. It doesn't seem like much compared to a billionaire, but consider this. Without investing, you'd have exactly zero. The difference isn't made by the initial amount, but by the consistency with which you nurture that habit. Compound interest works like a snowball. At first, it seems slow, almost insignificant, but with each turn, it grows faster and becomes unstoppable. Money works for you, even while you sleep, as long as you have the courage to start. The key isn't how much you earn today, but whether you have the discipline to set aside even a fraction and put it to work. Investing is like planting a tree. The best time was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Multiply your sources of income. If you depend on a single salary, you're building your life on a tightrope. An illness, a layoff, or an economic crisis can bring everything crashing down in an instant. True financial freedom doesn't come from a high income, but from multiple sources of money flowing to you at the same time. Buffett understood this as a child. While others only thought about school, he was already looking for ways to diversify. He delivered newspapers in his neighborhood, resold used golf balls, and installed pinball machines in barbershops, generating income every day without him having to be present. This multiple income mentality was the seed of his empire. Today, the opportunities are even greater. With the internet, you can sell digital products, open a small online business, offer freelance services, and monetize skills that once seemed like hobbies. Even an extra $50 a month, if invested with discipline, accelerates your path to independence. Imagine that those extra $50 aren't spent, but rather invested the same way we saw before, with an 8% annual return. In 20 years, that amount grows to over $30,000. Now multiply that by 3 or 4 sources of income, and you'll understand why the rich don't work harder but smarter. Your salary may be your foundation, but your extra income is the fuel that fuels your independence. Each new source is insurance against uncertainty and a lever that brings you closer to freedom. If this message resonates with you, write in the comments, "I accept success, money, and happiness into my life." Because when you declare with conviction what you accept into your life, your mind begins to act accordingly, and you open up space for new opportunities. The habit of financial education. Most of us spent more than a decade in school learning formulas, historical dates, and grammar rules, but almost no one received a single lesson on how to manage money. This lack of education is one of the main reasons why so many people, regardless of how much they earn, live trapped in debt and without a financial horizon. The good news is that today, knowledge is more accessible than ever. Books, podcasts, videos, and free courses offer the tools necessary to completely change the way you manage your resources. You don't need a college degree in finance to take control of your finances. What you need is the discipline to dedicate time to learning. Warren Buffett is the best example of this habit. He spends approximately 80% of his day reading. And he doesn't do it to accumulate useless data, but because he understands that his mind is his most valuable asset. Each page gives him new perspectives, strengthens his ability to make better decisions, and gives him clarity in the face of uncertainty. Now, let's put this into practice. Let's suppose that thanks to a free book or course, you learn a single strategy that allows you to save $100 a month on unnecessary expenses. In 1 year, that knowledge will have already generated a profit of $1,200. And if you invest those savings at an 8% annual return, in 20 years, they would exceed $50,000. All because of an idea learned from a $10 book or a free online video. The money you earn is limited by your job, but the knowledge you accumulate has no ceiling. Every new financial concept you learn can translate into savings, investments, or a new source of income. Therefore, anyone who dedicates time to financial education is, in fact, investing in their freedom. Think in decades, not days. Poverty feeds on immediacy. The scarcity mentality seeks instant gratification. Spend today, enjoy today, regardless of tomorrow's consequences. Silent wealth, on the other hand, flourishes over the long term, in the patient vision of those who know that every small sacrifice today multiplies into benefits tomorrow. Let's consider a concrete example. A person earning minimum wage decides to invest $100 a month in a fund with an average annual return of 8% and will accumulate more than $300,000 after 40 years. This is the power of compound interest at work over decades. It's not easy because it requires perseverance. It's not fast because it takes time. But it's real, and anyone with patience can achieve it. The problem arises when we live with a short-term mindset. We want to double our money in weeks, fall for miracle investments that turn out to be scams, or give up the habit of saving because the initial results seem small. But true financial freedom doesn't come as a stroke of luck. It's built like a tree. It's planted today, watered tomorrow, and protected for years until it produces shade and abundant fruit. Warren Buffett repeats it constantly. Someone sits in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. That phrase captures the essence of long-term thinking. Financial life isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, where the winner is the one who knows how to endure and stand firm. If you can shift your perspective from thinking about what I can have today to focusing on what I'm building for 10, 20, or 30 years from now, you will have taken one of the most powerful steps toward true freedom. Every dollar invested today is a seed your future self will appreciate. To reinforce this abundance mindset, write in the comments, "I am prosperous and I attract wealth." Because every word you speak shapes your mind and paves the way for opportunities that once seemed invisible. Living below your earnings. Today's world bombards us with a constant message: consume more, buy more, look better. Advertisements, social media, and even everyday conversations push us toward a lifestyle where success is measured in objects, not freedom. However, true wealth isn't found in owning more, but in needing less. Living below your earnings isn't resigning yourself to a limited life. It's creating space for your independence. Every dollar you choose not to spend is a dollar that can be invested, a financial soldier working for you instead of against you. The irony is that many people believe spending more gives them status, when in reality, it chains them to jobs and debt that rob them of time and peace. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on the planet, lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. Not because he couldn't afford mansions, but because he understands that freedom lies in simplicity. His quote sums it up perfectly. If you buy things you don't need, you'll soon have to sell things you do need. That's the hidden cost of consumerism, compromising your future to feed an empty present. Let's put this into numbers. Imagine you reduce your unnecessary expenses by $300 a month and decide to invest them in an index fund at 8% per year. In 20 years, that simple decision would be worth more than $170,000. That means a couple of dinners out each month, or foregoing fads, could translate into the possibility of buying a house in cash or retiring earlier. Living below your means isn't a lack of ambition, It's the greatest demonstration of financial intelligence. Because while others are chasing appearances, you are building a solid wealth, invisible to the eyes of the world, but powerful for your future. The builder's mindset. When we talk about wealth, we often think of large salaries or million-dollar inheritances. But the reality is that salary, in and of itself, doesn't define your financial destiny. What really makes the difference is how you use it, how you multiply it, and how you turn it into a building tool. Think of your money as bricks and mortar. Every bill that passes through your hands is a brick you can spend on a fragile roof that barely covers you today, or you can place it in the foundation of a fortress that will protect your future. That choice is repeated every month, every year, throughout your life. And the sum of those decisions is what determines whether you will be a slave to money or its master. The minimum wage may seem small, but even with that foundation, you can begin to build. If a person allocates just $50 a month to an investment plan with compound interest of 8% per year, in 30 years, they will accumulate more than $75,000. It's not the size of your salary, it's the size of your mindset. A builder understands that it's not about what they earn today, but about the vision they project for tomorrow. A builder's mindset also requires patience. No cathedral was built in a day. It required years of effort, placing stone upon stone, even when the final result wasn't visible. This is your financial journey. There will be times when you don't notice major changes, but each contribution is a stone that strengthens your structure. The difference between those who achieve freedom and those who remain trapped lies in this mindset. While some see limits, others see opportunities. While some spend on the ephemeral, builders invest in the lasting. And in the end, the wall you build today will be the refuge of your future. To consolidate this vision, write in the comments, "Nothing stops me, everything drives me." Because the builder doesn't give up in the face of obstacles, he uses them as additional blocks on his path to freedom. Imagine this: 10 years go by. You wake up without an alarm, without debt, with peace of mind. Your bank account reflects not only your effort, but also your discipline. The minimum wage, which once seemed like a chain, became the foundation of your freedom. You don't need luck, inheritances, or miracles. You need strategy, patience, and the determination to act today. Remember, financial freedom begins in your mind, and then it's reflected in your life. If this message resonated with you, it's no coincidence. It's because you're ready for the next step. Subscribe and join me on this journey. The next lesson may be the one that changes your destiny.